Welcome Academians. Today we will create this simple tic-tac-toe game using HTML, CSS and JavaScript. Yeah, this is the game. I tried a new format in this video where I don't type the whole code, and I hope it will be less destructive and it will be easier to keep your attention on the explanation rather than watching me typing the code. Please leave feedback in the comment section below. Without further ado, let's get started. As you can see, we will have three files in this exercise. Let's start up our index.html file first. We will add our basic HTML5 mockup, and in the head section we will tell our HTML document to use the external style sheet from our styles.css file. With the link tag and the script tag, we tell the document to load and execute the code from our index.js file. In the next two lines, I will add the Google font, but feel free to use any font that you like. I set the title to tic-tac-toe and we can move to fill in the body. I add the main tag with the background class. This will be the container of our game. Next, we will add the title section with the tic-tac-toe test followed by the display section where we show our players who is next. Notice that we have a span around our X with the display player and player X classes. We will use the display player class to notify the content of this span. So changing between users, and we use the player X class for coloring purpose in the next section. We will create our game grid. We will use 9 divs with the title classes to form these grid in our container. In next section we will announce our end game state. Of course it will be empty when the game starts, and we will manipulate these from JavaScript. The last section will be responsible for our controls, and we will have the reset button inside it. And that's it. This is the required mockup for our game. Let's open up styles.css and make this game look beautiful. Before that, see the entire code. Now for styling, style.css. Let's start by removing the browser defined paddings and margins. Set the font for the entire page using asterisk selector. Now we set the color of the background and set the color its height to cover all the page, and add 1 pixel top padding to avoid margin collapsing. With the title and display classes, as with the title and display classes, we rectify our text on the page and also give them a little spacing by introducing the hide utility class. We will be able to hide any UI elements on the page by applying this class to the given element. The container class will create our grid system for the tic-tac-toe board. We will use CSS grid to implement this and set the grid template column and grid template row properties so we can have three equal height columns and rows. I also set a match speed for it and apply auto margin. Here you can see that display button and what we apply auto margin. to center it horizontally. For the dice, with your set border, hmm, size and font size, and also we will center it with the flat spots. By setting cursor pointer, we give feedback for the user. The This feedback for the user element is clickable, just like an anchor tag. The player heads and the player row classes will be used to color different UI elements based on the player nest. We will center the contour section, add a little spacing to it, and give a little styling to our red reset button. Now it's a time to write the heart of our game using JavaScript. So let's jump into our index.js file. Before that, see this code, entire code. What I explained is here everything. Now I jump into index.js file. Here it is. In the First of all, I'm going to add an event listener on the window object to listen from the DOM content loaded event. This is needed because we included our JavaScript file in the head of our HTML document, and because of its position, this document position script will be processed before any HTML on the page. So by listening to these events, we will make sure that the HTML is processed by the browser and we can work with it. First, we have saved references to all our needed HTML elements using the DOM APIs. To be precise, we will use the query selector and query. All Please notice that for the tiles or we are wrapping these around with the array from function because the query selectorial function returns a node list which is an array like object. By converting it to a proper array, we have all the tools that we have for array at the bottom. I already added a click handler to the reset button, but we will implement that later. Let's create the variables that we will need for our game. We will create an array with 9 empty strings, and these will act for the board for us. We will store the current player, which can be X or O. We will store whether if we have an endgame result or the game is still active in the game active variable. I let three constant string values and each of them represents an endgame state, and we will use these to announce our endgame state. Next, we will collect and store all our winning condition states. In the winning conditions constant, please notice that this is an array of arrays and we store different indices in it. We will notice these conditions. See it once. Yeah, like this, the reset button is set and everything will be like this. I know it's pretty hard to understand at first time, but please look at the comment I place that below. It visually represents our tic-tac-toe board as we see it on the UI, and in every tile I wrote the index that will represent the specific tile on the UI. So please notice that the first winning condition O1 and 2 will be first horizontal line of the tic-tac-toe board. Now we will go through our title array and attack an event listener to every single tile in it. So now when we click on a tile, a user action function will be called. with the reference to the specific tile, and the index of it, we will use the tile reference to modify our UI, and we will use the index to update our in-memory saved board array. Now it's time to implement the user action function. It will represent a turn in the game. This function will be called when the user clicks on the tile first. We click we will check if the step is a valid action by passing the tile to the isValid action function. Here is game active. When we move up, this is the before explained content. Come here. Yeah, add event listener will be here. Is game active? Now the first action passing to the tile to the user is valid function. We will implement this later and we will check whether is our game active or not. So basically whether it has an end game state or a winner or a tie basically or not. If both conditions are true, so we have a valid action and the game is active. Then we will set the inner attacks to the current player, which will be X or O, and we will assign the player X or player or class based on the current player. Note that we are not using a conditional here, we are using the template string literals. So the current player inside the curly brackets will be X or O, depending on the current player's value. After that, we will call the update board and update our board array. Then we will check whether we have a winner or not in the handler resolver validation function. And after that, we will call the change player method. Let's implement that function. Now first we remove the class list of the current player, then we will change our current player to be X. If it was O or O, if it was X, and update the player display to display the current player with the appreciate class. Next, we will implement a helper function called announce, which will help to announce our winner or end game state to the users. It receives an endgame state called type, and based on that, we will modify the announcers in the HTML. Lastly, we will remove the hide class to show the enhancer to the user. Now it's time to implement the 100 result validation function. We will check if we have a winner or not by looping through our wing conditions array, and for every sub array which all contains three numbers, we will check if the array has the same characters for the indices. If any of the three elements is an empty string, so basically an empty title, we will skip that iteration using the continue keyword. If they are equal, then we set the round one variable to true and exit our for loop using the break keyword. If we have a winner, we will use our announce function and call it with player x1 or player o1 based on the current player's value, and we will set this game active to force. If we don't have a winner and our board doesn't have any empty strings left, then we won't have any winners. So we announce a tie. Now use write the update board function. It sets the value of the element in the board array at the given position to be equal to the value of the current player. Variable now we write is valid action. It basically checks whether the tile has a value already, and if it has it has it returns false, otherwise it returns true. We use this function to make sure that players only play empty tiles in their turns. Lastly, we will implement our reset board function, which we are reset the game state and reset the game state and the board. First we will set the board to contain 9 empty strings, then we will set the isGameActive variable to true and hide the announcer by adding the hide class. By definition, by by player H starts the game every time. So if the current player is moved, then we call the change player function. Lastly, we will update our UI, and for every tile we will set the inner text to be an empty string and remove any player related classes, and that's it. You have a working tic-tac-toe game using HTML, CSS, JavaScript. If you have any ideas, feedback or question, don't hesitate and write it in down in the comment section below. Now I will once again show the entire code, go through once. It is HTML code. So I will show styling also. CSS code. And then finally JavaScript. Yeah. And at last I'm coming to here. This is the output. I will play again for you. Yeah. At the beginning, I showed you H1. If we want to type, you can reset it, or when you refresh it, refresh automatically comes reset. You can play it again like this.